And we're live.
Great. Welcome back, everyone, to Elasmo Week. I'm your host for the week, Dr. David Schiffman. Elasmo Week is an online outreach event about the science of elasmobranchs, sharks, skates, and rays, and the scientists who study them. This week is all about diversity. The goal is to highlight the diversity of shark scientists, the many ways of doing elasmobranch research, and to show off as many weird and wonderful species as possible every year. Elasmo Week wants to make a platform where real scientists can share their love and work with the public. Our first speaker this evening is Carlee Jackson, who is a shark conservationist whose current research focuses on the effects of tourism on nurse sharks in Belize. She received her BS in biology from Florida Atlantic University in 2016, where she was also an NCAA swimmer and athletic academic scholar. This past summer, Carlee received her master's in marine science from Nova Southeastern University. She's also a member of the American Elasmobranch Society and a 2020 Young Professional Recruitment Fund Diversity Scholar. She's previously worked as an environmental educator for a company called Build a Field Trip, where she took school groups on immersive environmental and marine science focused field trips all across Florida. Currently, she is a marine turtle specialist at the Gumbo Limbo Nature Center in Boca Raton, where she monitors sea turtle nesting activity, works in the rehab center, and responds to strandings. Additionally, she co-founded Minorities in Shark Sciences, or MISS, an organization focused on amplifying underrepresented voices in shark science and increasing diversity in the field. She hopes to encourage more BIPOC to join the field of shark science and to be the representation in the field that she did not have while growing up. Carlee would like to continue research on the effects of tourism on sharks and hopes to extend her research disciplines into shark movement ecology and how various human activities may affect movement and migration patterns of these animals. You can find her on Twitter and Instagram at CarleeMJ underscore at the end. Take it away, Carlee.
Awesome. Thanks, David. All right, so I'm going to share my screen really quickly. All right, guys. So I'm going to talk tonight about the effects of provisioning tourism on nurse sharks. So my research this past year has focused on nurse sharks on an island called Keekalker. It's right off of Belize. And I've looked at the effects of provisioning tourism, and I'll go into what that means in a second here. All right, so wildlife tourism and provisioning tourism. I'm going to talk about both of those things for a second. So wildlife tourism really is any type of tourism where you are interacting with wildlife in their natural habitat, emphasizing in their natural habitat. So usually things like going to a place called Stingray City, where you can interact with wild stingrays. So the picture that you can see here, I was in Stingray City in the Bahamas. This was about 4 years ago, playing with some wild southern stingrays. And it also includes things on land. So if you are going on like safaris in Africa, that counts as wildlife tourism. You're interacting with wildlife out in the wild. Some other examples, even if you're just snorkeling with fish, snorkeling with sea turtles, things like that, that falls under the category of wildlife tourism. Now, this type of tourism is increasing lately. It's becoming a whole lot more popular. And that's because a lot of people are starting to realize that, our biodiversity is changing globally. There are like mass extinctions happening. We're losing some habitats. So people are trying to get out there, interact with these habitats, interact with these wildlife before they can't anymore. So it's definitely an increasing industry. Now, within wildlife tourism, we have marine wildlife tourism. So talking about going whale watching, swimming with dolphins out in the wild, or like I said a little earlier, snorkeling with different animals. And within that, we can get more specific into like provisioning tourism. So provisioning tourism specifically is the act of feeding wildlife in order to get them around humans. So it's a attraction for tourists to actually get like a guaranteed interaction with that wildlife. Provisioning tourism isn't only in marine settings. You can go feed gorillas on jungle excursions in certain places, or go feed like wild dogs or something. So yeah, that's a very popular industry because if you have food out, you're guaranteed to see an animal. And with sharks specifically, that is becoming popular because sharks are naturally very shy and elusive around humans, contrary to what a lot of movies like to say, but they are very shy towards humans. They kind of see us as predators, as this weird thing out in the water, like, I don't want to get close to you. So they're going to need a little bit of encouragement to come around humans. So that's where provisioning tourism comes in. So in the shark setting, there are a variety of different ways to conduct provisioning. So you can either actively feed sharks, so you can actually throw a bait from the boat and feed them at the surface, or divers can go underwater and hand feed sharks. So you'll see them with like bait boxes, or like they'll just have big heads of tuna and sharks will come by and eat them. Another way is also just chumming the water. So you can just put fish guts and fish oil and just chum the water, make it super smelly so that sharks come around and stick around the area. So that all encompasses provisioning tourism. So specifically within provisioning tourism, there are a lot of different studies on different species like reef sharks, stingrays in particular. They have a lot of studies on them in the provisioning tourism setting. But one species that is lacking on studies in this specific area of study is nurse sharks. So nurse sharks are super popular in a lot of different countries for provisioning tourism. But there really aren't a lot of papers or studies specifically on this species in regards to provisioning tourism. So there's a couple of different reasons for that. So nurse sharks, they're physiologically very different than a lot of the popular things or popular sharks used for tourism. Nurse sharks don't really look like bull sharks or even reef sharks. They kind of look like a weird, not weird, but they're like cute little puppy dog looking sharks. And they're also physiologically different. So they have a specialized way of breathing called buccal pumping. So they're benthic sharks, meaning they lay at the bottom and they use that buccal pump. They use their muscles in their cheek to suck in water to put through their gills. So they don't have to keep swimming in order to breathe. So that's definitely, there's a couple different things that are very different about nurse sharks that are different from like other provisioned sharks. So specifically, nurse sharks are provisioned in they're super popular in like the Caribbean. So in tropical places around Western Atlantic, nurse sharks are used for provisioning in the tourism setting. So I focused on an area called Shark Ray Village. So it's on a little island right here. It's called Keekalker. And here is a more, get this out of the way. Here's a more zoomed in version of Keekalker. So Shark Ray Village is a small provisioning site in Keekalker. And they specifically will provision nurse sharks and southern stingrays. So there's two targeted species here, nurse sharks and the southern stingrays. So it's a very small area, like maybe about like 100 meters square wide. And it's just a bunch of nurse sharks over there. So in this map, you can see there's the barrier reef. So Belize has the second largest barrier reef in the world. And that reef tract kind of starts around here. Shark Ray Village sits right west of that reef tract. You can literally see the reef from Shark Ray Village. So it sits right there, and it's mainly made up of like seagrass and coral rubble starting to pop up right before that barrier reef. So it's a super shallow water as well. So in some of the videos, you might be able to see tourists standing up, but it's literally about 5 feet of water. So it's a very ideal place to have provisioning tourism because your tourists, even if they're not strong swimmers, they can just swim around with the sharks in 5 feet of water. So it's a pretty cool place. But yeah, so I use this as my study area for looking at the effects of provisioning on nurse sharks. All right, so my objectives for this study, I had 4 different objectives, and I'll go through what I did for each of them. So my first objective was to assess if the behavior of nurse sharks were different between the presence or absence of provisioning, or just the presence or absence of food. I also wanted to determine if their behavior differed between the presence or absence of boats. And I also evaluated habituation of nurse sharks to tour boats in Shark Ray Village. And I also looked at the abundance of nurse sharks in Shark Ray Village and compared that to other little control sites around. And I said a new word, and that word was habituation. And basically, habituation is just an unnatural aggregation or unnatural aggregation of animals to an area. So it's a repeated aggregation in response to a stimuli. So basically in this situation, food would be the stimuli, or the presence of boats would be the stimuli. So it's basically telling the sharks, if there's a boat there, if you smell food there, or if you smell something there, like food's gonna be in that area, just go there. So they're going to just keep coming to the same place because they know they're going to get food from this area. So that's just what habituation is. So for the first part, where I looked to see if there were any changes in behavior between the presence or absence of food and boats, I actually looked at 5 different swimming behaviors. So these are behaviors that have been used in previous papers looking at how sharks respond to the presence of divers. So I use these to look to see if the presence of food, the presence of boats were affecting what behaviors they were showing. So the first behavior I was looking at was milling. And basically these 2 sharks that you see here are kind of milling around. So there's no purposeful swimming. They're swimming in circles, frequent directional changes. Another behavior was active swimming. So that's when sharks are moving from point A to point B with no turns. They were purposefully swimming. And then I also looked at aggression behavior. So conspecific aggression was aggression between nurse sharks. So nurse sharks would actually bite each other, they would shove each other, and they would just they did this funny thing where they would literally pin each other down on the ground in order to get the food at the surface. So that was conspecific aggression. And interspecific aggression is aggression between nurse shark and a non-nurse shark. So this was usually seen with the stingrays. So the stingrays were the other target species. So they were kind of competition for the nurse sharks. So the nurse sharks would not be very nice to them sometimes. So they would bite the stingrays, or they would do the same thing that they would do to each other, like pin them down. Literally, these nurse sharks would just slam themselves just down on these stingrays so that they couldn't get the food at the top. Not very nice. And then the last behavior was shark-initiated human interaction. So I wanted to see how many times sharks were initiating contact with humans. And this could be between the tourists or between the surveyors that were actually in the water. So yeah, and the way I recorded all of this, if you guys are super interested, I can give you more detail, but basically I took the frequency of behavior we were seeing. So just how many times each behavior was happening within 1 hour. And I did all of this through video reviews. So we recorded in Shark Ray Village, kind of using the cameras as our eyes and constantly scanning the area, staying within one area. And I would review all of these videos and count the frequency of all the behaviors that I saw. And then I talked about habituation. So the way I recorded habituation, I compared max N of sharks when boats were present and when boats were absent. So max N is also a new term. So max N is a video recording method. You would take the maximum amount of individuals within one video frame, and that would be your max N for that survey. So however many nurse sharks or the most amount of nurse sharks that I could see at one time in the video, that was the max N. So I looked at the max N between when boats were actually present in Shark Ray Village and when boats were absent. And I compared that, and that's how I looked at habituation. So with that, I also set up cameras in Shark Ray Village. So I didn't use bruvs for this project because the sharks there were so, they're so responsive to food, they would probably absolutely destroy a bruv. So what I did in Shark Ray Village, I set up a GoPro on a tripod right in the middle of Shark Ray Village. And I would count the amount of sharks that would come into view of my camera up until the first boat came. So I would start 30 minutes or 45 minutes before a boat came, and then count the number of sharks until the first boat came. So usually that looked like a very upward slope. So there would be no sharks at the beginning of the video. Then as soon as a boat comes, there would be all these sharks just swimming around, waiting for food to be thrown to them. So yeah, so that's how I looked at habituation. And what else? So I also looked at abundance. That was the last thing that I was looking for in my objectives. And basically, I was setting up a tripod in Shark Ray Village, the same as I did with habituation, taking the max N of sharks there. And I also did that in 7 different control sites all around Shark Ray Village. So they were usually around like 5 miles or so away from Shark Ray Village. That was the furthest that the reefs were from the main study site. So compared the max-in in those control sites to the max-in in Shark Ray Village to kind of get a feel of how many different sharks, or to get a feel of how many sharks were in Shark Ray Village versus outside of Shark Ray Village. All right. So I'll talk a little bit about what we saw with the behaviors that I was looking at. And I apologize in advance for not having more videos, guys. My computer crashed, but we're working through this. We're using what I have. So yeah, so what I found with the behaviors was really cool. So the sharks were completely modifying their behaviors in response to presence of boats and the presence of food. So for example, sharks would be milling around a lot more whenever food was in the water. So they would just be swimming around in circles, usually swimming from boat to boat, trying to figure out where am I going to get food, or they would just be milling right up under a boat. So just circling up under a boat, waiting to get fed. And then also we saw that aggression definitely happened more often when there was food in the water. So when there's food in the water, the sharks are just biting at each other, biting at the stingrays, trying to get food. That's pretty simple. And then we also, or this kind of overall like raises a little bit of questions as in what kind of energy are these sharks using? So naturally, nurse sharks are nocturnal, and that means they're mainly active at night. So nurse sharks, usually during the day, you find them sleeping up under rocks or sleeping up under corals and just minding their own business. And then at night, that's when they feed, that's when they're swimming around, that's usually when they're most active. But here in Shark Ray Village, you can see it is middle of the day, bright, and they are very, very active. Now, I asked the question, are they active at night still? Are they kind of just doing the reverse behavior as in they're just being active during the day and sleeping at night? Or are they just always active all the time and just kind of resting in between boats that come to the area? So yeah, I didn't get to do any night surveys, but in the future, I definitely want to do that in order to figure out if these sharks are, doing the complete opposite of what they're naturally supposed to do. So yeah, what else did I find? And then the really cool thing with the habituation, we found that these sharks were actually not habituated to the presence of humans per se. They were habituated to the sound of the boat engine. So physically we could see this, and also the statistics showed us this. Sharks would be kind of just gone from the area when there were no boats in the area. So even when tour boats came and then left and there were literally no boats in the area, the sharks would just leave. And even with the surveyors in the area, there were no sharks to be seen. And as soon as a boat came close to Shark Ray Village and they could hear that boat engine, kind of right at the beginning of the seagrass, these sharks just kind of come out of nowhere. Well, they're coming from somewhere, but they look like they're just coming out of nowhere, and just immediately they are milling around the boat. They're swimming straight towards the boat, trying to get food, knowing that they're most likely going to get food from this boat. So this is showing us that they are very habituated to the sound of the boat engine. And this kind of makes sense based on sharks' sensory biology and the senses that nurse sharks specifically use in order to detect their prey. So nurse sharks, they initially will use their olfactory senses and their electrosensory senses, and they'll just smell out the food. And they're also using auditory senses. So this kind of makes sense. All of their senses are immediately being, alerted that there is food in the water. And while the boats are feeding, the tour guides purposely leave their engines on to keep the sharks around their boat. So some tour guides that didn't even have food, they would turn their engines on, and just the noise of the engine would make sharks mill around their boat, and their tourists will still get, that shark experience, even though they didn't have food. So that was a really cool find. But unfortunately, this specific habituation to the sound of the boat engine led to some problems with these sharks. So in this picture, you guys can see on the dorsal fins of these sharks, there are little notches. And you can also see in this second picture here, how close that shark is to the boat propellers. And because these sharks are so habituated to the sound of the engine, the loudest part of the engine is kind of near where the propeller is, where it's in the water. And these sharks would get really close to that, and they would get hit by the boat propellers. We also saw sharks with injuries on their mid bodies as well as their fins. And you can see this shark has more little notches on the back of his fin. But so this definitely causes problems with the sharks. This affects their swimming mobility. So they're probably using a lot more energy in order to swim and stay hydrodynamic in the water. And also this raises concern for infection as well. So those bodily scars that we saw on some of these sharks can definitely lead to infection, which could lead to mortality in some of these sharks as well. So overall, that is not a very good thing when it comes to habituation of these sharks to the boat engines. And then finally, in regards to the abundance of sharks and how many sharks I saw outside of Shark Ray Village, officially on survey video, we actually saw 0 nurse sharks in surrounding reefs around Shark Ray Village, even as far as 5 miles out. So this doesn't necessarily mean all the nurse sharks are in Shark Ray Village and they're just completely overusing that area. This could mean that the sharks outside of Shark Ray Village are exhibiting natural behaviors. So they're actually laying under reefs and rocks during the day and just being active at night. And since all my surveys were during the day, I could just be seeing the result of that. So basic conclusions I made from this whole project was that these sharks were completely modifying their behavior to maximize access to a resource. So they were changing their nocturnal behavior to diurnal behavior in order to gain access to food, because all animals, food is like #1 resource for them. And it's also showing they really lack human avoidance. So the sharks there were not scared of humans. They will easily come around humans. And yeah, like I said, they're being a whole lot more active during the day, also raising concerns on, are they getting enough energy for all this activity? Because, nurse sharks, like I said, they usually are sleeping during the day and just chilling all day. We also conclude that they've developed a learned response to the boats. This also kind of goes back to how long they've been in this area. So I actually heard from the fisheries management there that this was an area, a provisioning area for about 15 years. So these sharks have had ample time to develop a learned response to boats. But unfortunately, it is causing the consequence of physical injury. So because they're so habituated to that boat engine sound, they are getting hit by the boat propellers because they're getting just way too close by the boat propellers. That sound is just screaming food to them. And finally, definitely concluded that there is a very high concentration of nurse sharks within Shark Ray Village compared to areas outside of Shark Ray Village. But clearly more research needs to be done on what these sharks in Shark Ray Village are doing at night, and also if other sharks outside of the area are being more active at night as well. So if you guys have any questions, further questions on more detailed things about my project and what I did, more of my findings, feel free to reach out on Instagram, Twitter. You can tweet at me if you like that. And also you can send me an email as well. And also, please don't forget to follow Miss, the organization I co-founded. Follow us at Miss_Elasmo. That's both for Instagram and Twitter.
Great, thanks, Carlee. So tonight's going to be a little different, everyone, because Carlee had a shorter talk due to computer issues. We're going to fill the second half of this time with having a conversation. And I guess first and foremost, you talked a lot here and showed pretty convincingly that the presence of this visioning tourism has a major impact, major changes on the behavior of these animals. And I know that you've reviewed the literature that has found similar effects elsewhere. So here's a question: is that bad?
Yeah, so I can't give you a straight answer on that because there's definitely some very bad things, like I showed with them getting hit by boat propellers, their natural behaviors being reversed, but also these animals are getting fed and they've shown that, we don't know for sure if this is the only source of food they have, but they've definitely shown that they are very habituated to the food and they want this food. This food is a main source of resource for them. So this practice, I think it can't just be completely scrapped. Like we can say it's bad for them but we can't completely take it away because we don't really know what these animals are going to do if we just completely take away this food resource to them. And also, I just think that, oh my gosh, I lost my thought for the second part. But yeah, I just think that there are ways to still do it in a very safe way. So like mitigate the effects that they're having on the animals. So for example, with the boat propellers, if those boaters just put propeller guards on their propellers, then we probably wouldn't have such a bad issue with the sharks getting hit by them or, getting cut by them. And also, I think if the tour guides turned their boat engines off while they were feeding the sharks, it could help lessen that effect of, boat propel, like back of the boat means food's going to be there. So we're going to just swim super close to the boat propellers. So yeah, so we can say that this is horrible for the animals or like, oh, this isn't affecting them at all. But like because this is such an important resource for the country as well, like it's a revenue, it's money. There's no way we can rightfully say we can't do this anymore. Like this is like inherently bad. So I think that it can be a good thing if you make sure you're doing it in a safe way for the animals and for the humans involved as well, and make it like educational. I think that another positive thing about provisioning tourism in general is that it's as long as you're going with the, the right tour guides, it's very educational for you. And a lot of the tour guides that I talked to, they said that they try to make sure the tourists leave with knowledge, so they know more about the animals. Even though it's in a setting that might not be super environmentally friendly, they are still taking away a lot, and it's gonna, you never know, it might spark interest for them to either get into the field or just contribute more to research and conservation efforts. So that was a long-winded answer, but
So the answer is it depends.
it depends, yes.
So if I am going on vacation when it's safe to leave my house again, and I want to go do one of these wildlife provisioning experiences, what should I look for to make sure I'm finding one that has as minimal of a negative impact as possible?
Yeah, so a lot of the tour guides that I talked to in Belize, they on their I think on their like business cards, they usually say eco-friendly, and usually all these places have websites that you can look into as well, like to see what their practices are. But good eco-friendly practices for tour boats usually include not feeding the animals, so they'll just go to the area. They know that the animals are going to come around because they think they have food, but they won't actively feed the animals. Also, if they have, like, I think that if they're adequately like educating you on what to do in coral reefs, so if they're like, make sure you don't touch anything, don't kick anything, don't get close to any of the animals, then you know for sure that they are very much concerned about the environment and the reefs that they're taking you to. And yeah, I just think that if they also have like I think I said this already, but like education, I don't know, all the good tour guides that I talked to said that a big thing for them is educating their tours. So if you leave a tour guide with like way more knowledge than you came with, then that's how you know it's a it's a good
Okay.
thing.
So it seemed like in some of the pictures there, you were having a heck of a time interacting with these animals. I have done some of these provisioning dives, but most of my experiences with wild sharks have been with one off in the distance that you see for a few seconds before it swims away, as you mentioned. What's it like seeing sharks like this?
Yeah, it was when I first went into the area. I remember being like, oh my gosh, all these sharks just, it was probably immediately like 10 or 15 sharks all around our boat. I was just like, this is amazing. Like my first instinct was just like, oh my, I just want to jump in the water and just like have them all swim all around me. But it's because they're nurse sharks, it's definitely not the same like, oh my gosh, there's sharks all around me. If you don't really know sharks, then maybe that's the experience you would get. But definitely for me, it was just like, I think nurse sharks are very like beautiful animals. They have a very pretty color, and just being surrounded by all of them was just like, I don't know, it was serene. It was very serene. Definitely an experience I don't know if I'll ever get here in Florida.
Yeah. On most of the dives I did in Florida, we'd see nurse sharks, but like one, and it was
Yeah,
sitting under a rock. And then when you went back to that same reef a week later, it was still under the same rock.
exactly.
So it's still cool to see them, but I've never seen 12 nurse sharks swimming around a person at once. Those videos were
Yeah.
bananas.
It was pretty fun. It was fun watching some of the tourists as well kind of just be like, oh my gosh, there's sharks. I'm like, they're just nurse sharks.
So let's shift gears a little here and talk more about you. So you're like me from the Midwest, pretty far from the ocean.
Yes.
How'd you get into sharks?
Yeah, so I am originally from Detroit, very far from the ocean, but we've got the Great Lakes around us, but no sharks there, thankfully. But I was let's see, I was about 6 years old when I read my first book on sharks, and it was just a random occurrence. I saw a book on sharks and I said, I need to read this. And I begged my mom to buy it for me. So I read this book and immediately I was just hooked on sharks. I don't really remember what exactly it was that kind of got me to be like, sharks are the most amazing thing ever. But I just remember reading and just being like, this would be the coolest thing to work with. So ever since then, I was like, I'm going to work with sharks. And here I am. It stuck with me since I was 6 years old. So
This is
yeah,
a very familiar story among our colleagues.
yes.
And actually, there seem to be a lot of marine biologists from the Midwest.
Yeah,
There's something about growing up far from the ocean that makes the ocean seem more appealing.
exactly. And you can get all of your family members to come visit you in the
Hmm.
warm areas that you're going to live.
That's always a plus.
Mhm.
So let's talk about this organization that you co-founded. That everyone watching this is watching it on Miss's YouTube
YouTube.
channel.
Yep.
So what's the history of this organization? It started this summer, but what was the cause and what are the goals?
Yeah, so it started in January,
Oh,
June, sorry,
oh
June,
yeah.
the wrong J.
I was gonna say
June, sorry,
no
June,
worries.
a couple months ago. And it kind of started with it was what is it, Black in STEM week on Twitter. And there was a hashtag called hashtag Black in Nature. And this was all after George Floyd incidents and when Black Lives Matter kind of blew up a little bit. And so Black in Nature was a hashtag meant to highlight a lot of different Black individuals that were in environmental or nature fields. And because you don't really see that, that representation like anywhere. It was my first time seeing a bunch of Black people in nature and loving it and and just like actually working in the field. So I posted a tweet and did the hashtag Black in Nature, had my turtle pictures and my shark pictures, and it got a lot of visibility. And I think on someone I think it was Jasmine, like commented on it and was like, oh my gosh, like another Black girl in shark science. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I've never seen another Black girl in shark science. And then like I saw Monty and Jada, and then we are like, wow, we should start a club. So it literally just started with us four discovering each other, because this whole time we kind of thought we were alone. And once we all like got together and we're like, we're gonna start a club, we kind of decided that we don't want anyone else to feel like this. We don't want anyone to feel alone. We want other people to know that we are in this field and we're doing our own research, and we're not white men, we're Black, we're Black girls. And yeah, so we were like, we're gonna start this organization. So we came up with Miss Minorities in Shark Science, and our goal is to just highlight and amplify the diverse voices in this field, because you don't really get a very diverse representation in shark science. It is a very one-sided thing on media for sure. And our goal, like I said, is to amplify those voices and also kind of create a space where other people or other minorities in the field can feel safe and have a resource and a support group almost. So, and like a little community family.
Hmm.
So
What's the reception been so far? It's only been a few months. How
we,
you've had some amazing membership growth and fundraising success,
yes.
and how's that? What's been going
Yeah,
on?
so our fundraising, we met like our yearly goal in 3 months. So we raised over $25,000, and that's all going towards a workshop that we're creating. So we're gonna create a workshop for minority women who can come and participate in shark research for a weekend. So it's like a shark research field workshop, and it'll be by application, and we're making it so that no one has to pay for anything. So the applicants don't have to, they pay $0 for this experience. And a big barrier in the field of shark science and marine science in general is that you have to pay for a lot of experience. And unfortunately, in the minority community, that can be very difficult. it can be a very difficult barrier to overcome. So we are trying to minimize that barrier, and that's what our donation money is going towards, so that we can make this experience completely free for them. So, and then also we opened a membership, like a membership thing for Miss. And we have over 100 members, and I think from like 10 or 11 different countries. And these are all women who are in the field of shark science, or at least have like an interest to be in the field of shark science. And it's like, there's so many of us minority women out there are in the field, who are pretty far up in the field, but we just don't get as much representation. So with these members, we are doing more outreach. So you'll see some of our members out here doing outreach. I'm pretty sure one of our members is going to be presenting after me today. So yeah, so it's just been really cool seeing all of that and seeing how much it's grown and how much of a community we've created as well. So
wonderful. So if someone wants to learn more, and if they want to become a member or support you, how can they do that?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, which is misselasmo.org, you'll find everything about like our process for membership, becoming even a friend of Miss. If you're not a minority in shark science and you want to still help the cause, you can apply to be a friend of Miss. And you'll also see a page where it just lists all of our members and like their contact information if you want to reach out, or if you and it just goes into what their research interests are, and there's a lot on our website. So, and the donate button is on our website as well.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about your other interest of what's behind me here, the sea turtles.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I left my, I'll get my other thing in a second.
So what's different about studying sea turtles versus studying sharks? What appeals to you about both?
Yeah, so sea turtles are really cool. Sea turtles are the prey of some sharks. So oddly enough, I work in a sea turtle hospital as well, and we get a lot of sea turtles that have shark bite injuries. So yep, just like that one. Yep, just like that. Most of them make it though. We'll help them out. But yes, love it. But yeah, sea turtles, I love sea turtles, and they have such personality. That's just a little different from sharks. But I work in a sea turtle hospital, and I work by monitoring the sea turtle nests on the beach. But yeah, so the biggest difference, I guess, I'm a little bit more, I'm more worried about getting bit by a sea turtle than I am by a shark. There's definitely more instinct. Exactly. They're always coming at you with their mouth straight open, and they've got like attitude. The sea turtles look cute, but yeah, sometimes they're not cute at all. But yeah, I would say the biggest difference is I have to worry about getting bit a whole lot more often with sea turtles than I do with sharks.
So you're involved in monitoring the nesting beaches. Walk us through a night of that. What's that like?
Yeah, so sea turtles in South Florida, they nest from March to October. And our beaches, we get loggerhead sea turtle, or loggerhead, greens, and leatherback sea turtles. And what we do is we actually go out on the beach in the morning right before sunrise. So like 6 a.m. I'm not a morning person, but I still do this job. And we'll drive up the beach and we look for their tracks that come out of the water. So sea turtles only nest at night, because that's the safest for them. So we'll look for their tracks that come out of the water. We identify what species it is, and then we put a triangle barrier around the nest. So basically, sea turtles are federally protected. So if you touch a nest, you will get fined or you will go to jail. So yeah, so I help out with that. And it's really cool seeing a nesting mama. Sometimes in the mornings, like they'll just be still nesting because it's just a sunrise and they're just a little late. But seeing a nesting mama turtle never gets old. I think I've worked this for about 4 seasons now, like 4 years. And yeah, seeing nesting mamas are pretty cool.
Have you seen any of the nests hatch?
Yeah, we've seen some of the nests hatch, and they are kind of, I think we only have about a month or so left of hatching, and those little hatchlings are just running to the water and then immediately getting eaten by things like the shark over here. Let me show you guys this.
Amazing.
Yes.
And you said your boss made that for you?
Yes, my boss made this for me and got it for me for Christmas. He knows me very well, as you can see. And the hatchling, he doesn't seem too sad though. I don't know.
No, just happy to be a part of the circle of life.
Exactly. So yeah, hatchlings, I like to tell my guests this, but hatchlings are like little cookies in the sea to everything that can fit its mouth around it. So this shark is just eating a cookie. It's a little cookie.
We are just about out of time here, but is there anything else that you'd like to talk about or anything you wished I'd ask you that I didn't get a chance to?
No, I think you got about everything. Yeah, I'm just happy to talk about like my research and my career. And like I said, if you guys have any more questions throughout the day tomorrow, I'll actually be tweeting some of the videos that I wasn't able to show today. But yeah, so just reach out if you guys have any further questions about absolutely anything relating to sharks and sea turtles. There we go.
Wonderful. And for everyone watching at home, there will be a reminder that on Sunday evening, we're going to have a live Q&A with all of the Elasmo Week speakers. So if you have any questions for Carlee about what you heard about today, type them as a comment on this YouTube video, tweet them at Elasmo Week or tweet them at Carlee. And then we will get to them on Sunday evening when we have our live chat with everybody. Thanks everybody for watching, and thanks a lot, Carlee.
No problem. Thank you.